He wasn't shopping for maternity clothes. When I was 22 years old, I worked at a maternity clothing store in the mall. It was a very small store with 5 employees, so each employee usually worked their shift alone. One evening, when business was particularly slow and there were no customers, example, I was the only person there, a man entered the store. He was about 35 years old and looked like a stereotypical creeper. Thick glasses, patchy stubble, old balding pattern, clothes that just didn't fit right. Also, the fact that he was by himself was unusual. Most men that came into the store were there with their pregnant wives or girlfriends, but occasionally, a guy would come in alone to pick up something for his wife or girlfriend or daughter. However, when I inquired if he needed any help, he simply muttered, "I'm just looking." This reply was also out of the ordinary, because usually the men that came into the store alone were unfamiliar with shopping for maternity clothes and gladly accepted the salesperson's assistant. Again, at this time, I thought this was unusual, but I figured he merely wanted to shop in peace. The man wandered towards the back of the store, and I turned my focus back to some paperwork on the counter. Several minutes later, I turned my attention to the customer again. He was thumbing through the clearance maternity dresses, because the company I work for places great emphasis on checking in with customers frequently. I walked over to the man and asked him if he was looking for any particular style of dress. Again, the same mumbled no. I went back to the desk, bored and hating the fact that salespeople are required to constantly bug customers to avoid godforsaken fate of losing a sale. 15 minutes later, he was still thumbing through the same dresses. Mind you, there were only about 5 different styles in the clearance section. It was clear he was either looking for a specific item and just really didn't want my help in finding it, or he was just trying to look busy and was in the store for some reason that didn't involve purchasing a clearance maternity dress. It was at this point that I asked him, "Sir, are you looking for something for your wife or girlfriend? I understand there's many other pregnant relations he could have had, like a sister, friend, or a cousin, but in this case, a guy would invariably say, no, I'm looking for my whatever relative." However, when I asked this guy if he was looking at clothes for his wife or girlfriend, he simply said, "No." "Okay," I replied. "Well, please let me know if you have any questions." Back to the counter I went. Going through my paperwork, keeping an eye on the customer, I began to feel increasingly unnerved. Occasionally, he would break his intense concentration on the 5 clearance dresses to stare at me. Eventually, he wandered away from those dresses and started meandering closer to the counter, absent-mindedly glancing at some of the clothes along the way. For several minutes, he continued this pattern of walking towards the counter, stopping to flip through a few articles of clothing, looking up and staring at me, and then walking a few more paces. I was getting scared. I wanted him out of the store, but I didn't know what to do or say to make him leave, because he technically hadn't done anything that would have warranted my asking him to exit the store. However, I knew that something was absolutely not right with the situation, and I didn't want to find out just how wrong it was. I was contemplating calling security when a pregnant woman and her husband walked into the store. And as soon as they did, I kid you not, as soon as they walked into the store, the creepy guy immediately headed for the door. But before he walked out, right as he passed the counter, he leaned in closely and whispered, "I'll be back." Then he exited the store, turned back and looked at me, then looked to his left and right, and disappeared into the mall. I called mall security and described what had just happened and asked them to keep a close watch on the store. My fiancé also came to the store and stayed nearby while I closed up, then walked me out to my car. I never saw that guy again, but every time I worked there after that, I remember what he said about coming back. And I don't think it was the maternity dresses that he planned to come back for. The time I almost became a statistic. This subreddit was a great discovery during the last couple of weeks, when huge essays had to be written, so to thank everyone, I figured I would contribute the story that scarred me for life. I've been doing a bit of soul searching, and this story has been on my mind. I'm a male. I'll be 24 in less than a month. I live in Toronto, and this happened when I was 12 or 13. It was a very long time ago, and I seem to have repressed some of it, so I'm not certain. I just remember I was in middle school when it happened. If anyone lives in Toronto, you might be familiar with Parkway Mall. It's gone to shit in the last decade, but a decade ago, it was at least 2 steps above shit. While everyone else loved the good mall, Fairview or Eaton, I loved this place because I didn't care for fashion. Young capitalist me loved useless shit at cheap price, and that was in the glory days of Dollar Store and Byway. Whenever anyone went there, I would always tag along. One day, my dad and sister needed to go to a bank with a teller. The closest one was Parkway, so off we went. This mall's main store kept changing after Kmart Canada went bankrupt and no one could afford to stay there. At the time of this story, there was a Zellers there. When we got there, I needed to piss and there was a washroom in Zellers, so I figured I would run in, use the bathroom, and run out, with plenty of time to wander around the stores. Now, if you're reading, I went into the Zellers washroom and ran up to the urinal farthest to the door. I'm a freakishly big guy now, but in middle school I was fairly shrimpy. I'm standing there when this guy walks in. The washroom was previously empty, but now there's someone else here. No big deal. He walks in and takes the urinal right next to me. Immediately, my warning signs start going off, getting stronger when he starts saying something, mumbling something under his breath, quietly enough to sound like he's speaking to himself, but loud enough for me to hear him. There's too many of them out there. They're gonna come in. There's not enough time. I'm starting to feel wary, but still a bit curious. This curiosity doesn't last long, because his next words are louder than before, clearly directed at me. Tell you what, let me see your dick. He looks downwards and says, that's pretty good. Thanks for the compliment, asshole. That compliment made me realize I had to leave, so I did. Pants unzipped, hands unwashed, I just ran. I ran back to my dad and my sister. I told them what happened. Then, while they were asking me questions, I saw the scumbag leave the store. I still didn't say anything. I asked my dad to escort me into another washroom so I could at least wash my hands. Until the day before this day, my dad and my sister were the only 2 people who've heard the story, and I don't even know if they remember it. As I never really made a big deal about it, this might actually be the way of confessing. Who knows? Thinking recently, I realize there's so many of my life's problems stem from that incident. My depression, my suicidal tendencies, my borderline OCD hand washing. To this day, I still feel guilty that I didn't say anything, not because of myself, but because I know that if there weren't so many of them out there, this guy would not have a problem raping a kid. Every time I see a news article about such an incident, the guilt comes back up. On the other hand, I always felt stupid about being traumatized by this because nothing happened to me. It's like my own case of survivor's guilt. One more side effect is that, for the longest time, I could not use public washrooms. I would have a panic attack if I tried. Going to university, where home is a 2-hour bus ride away, dealt a bit with that, but still can't use urinals unless the washroom is entirely abandoned. Finally, I'm sorry that this has gone so long, but it started difficult and got a bit therapeutic along the way. Something that I don't understand about that is this. I distinctly remember the guy from the washroom, and I distinctly remember the guy who left the store. I know for certain that they were the same person. But now, when I think about that day, they look different. I don't know why my brain decided to change the face of one of them. I just don't get it. Anyways, that's my story. I look forward to reading more of yours.